From a definition perspective, these are a couple of definitions that I pulled that I thought were really helpful. So especially the second one, we all know what stress feels like, right? And we can be stressed in any day or any moment. Burnout is really classified more from an excessive amount of stress or prolonged over a long period of time, and really a combination of those two. And just to dive in a little bit deeper, although I kind of just covered, there are some definitions out there, burnout is a relatively new phenomenon. It's not really classified as an emotion. And there's also no specific medical diagnosis for burnout either. The World Health Organization actually classifies burnout as an occupational phenomenon, so very specific to feelings of burnout related to your work. I do think that there's burnout outside of the workplace as well, right? Full-time caregivers, for example, can absolutely experience burnout, would be the first example that comes to mind. But it's just interesting to me as it's a relatively new topic, right? So I've been reading this book called Atlas of the Heart by Brené Brown, and she covers 87 different emotions that make up the human experience. And I thought these two were interesting, right? So I kind of have her definition of stress and the definition of overwhelm. And really the difference between the two and the big delineation that she talks about is overwhelm is stress and then a level of intensity of stress to the point of feeling unable to function, right? So an example of this would be if you're stressed one day and your partner or your roommate comes home and you're like, oh, I'm so stressed. And they're like, oh my gosh, okay, what do you need? How can I help? You're able to say, I need you to make dinner for the kids. I need the trash to be taken out. I'm really nervous about my presentation tomorrow. I'd love to run through it with you. You can kind of articulate even though you're in a stress space. Whereas overwhelm, you're not even able to explain the state that you're in. You're kind of beyond that cognitive function. And just a personal perspective is I kind of feel like burnout is almost somewhere in the middle of these two states. In a couple of slides, I'm going to get into some signs that you can that come up for burnout. And it's not really quite to the point of being completely unable to function, but there is some level of losing some typical functions that you have and feel comfortable with on a regular cadence. So jumping into some causes of burnout. So these are more like categories. I think there's such a big realm of causes of burnout, right? But these are just some larger themes and categories that we see. Would love to hear from any of you if you'd be comfortable or willing to type in any causes of burnout that you maybe don't think are captured here. So the biggest and most common one I would say is unsustainable workload, right? Just having too much on your plate than you can even manage. That's something that's going to cause burnout. Perceived lack of control is something that can come up as well. So having a feeling that you are not able to have control over your environment or your situation can also lead to feelings of burnout. Insufficient rewards for effort, right? So it's kind of that balance between knowing feeling if the effort that you're putting in, if you're getting a sufficient amount or adequate amount of rewards back for that. And that could be intrinsic rewards, right? So fulfillment, purpose, whereas extrinsic might be more monetary or accolades or recognition. So, everybody kind of has a different personal rewards that maybe are more meaningful to them, but just kind of an imbalance between those two things. And then mismatched values versus your skill set or like the skills that you are using. So let's say that you work in a job or with a company that completely misaligns with the values that you hold personal to you. That's also going to be a driver to or cause of burnout. So getting into some signs of burnout. So I wanted to use this iceberg kind of analogy and visual, right? Because there are signs of burnout that are a little bit more visible. So that's like the top of the iceberg. So those are more apparent to others and yourself, right? So exhaustion is one of the biggest one. Having insomnia, which is going to lead to that exhaustion and fatigue. Getting sick really quickly, or really frequently rather. Being really irritable. And then there are more of those like below the surface that might not be as visible to others, or maybe even like less recognizable to yourself initially. So loss of motivation, a lot of self-doubt and lack of confidence when you previously had that confidence, detachment, no longer enjoying activities that you typically enjoy, lack of creativity. So those are some that are more below the surface. And again, same thing here. If anyone else has any signs that they feel or have heard of burnout, feel free to kind of share that with the group as well. Inability to connect with people, shut down. Yep, that's a good one, Molly. So I did also want to talk about signs of burnout in the workplace. So if you're a manager or a leader, it's really helpful to understand and know how you could potentially identify that someone on your team is struggling with burnout. So increased absences, less engagement, obviously that, visibly being tired and exhaustion piece, withdrawal. So that's speaking to what Molly was just speaking to, like that inability to connect with people, withdrawing from, your typical level of engagement, higher sensitivity, increased mistakes. So these are just some examples. And I would say to, some of these, right, there may be team members that you have that are naturally quieter, or maybe team members that you have that are naturally more sensitive, and both of those things are completely okay. So I would say from a signs of burnout, it's more of like a delineation from the norm. Is this typical for what you have experienced with this team member?